As many of you know, I've done most of my videos over the years about Asian art, a bit on history of Asia, China, Japan, auction prices, and so forth. But at the bottom of it all, at the core of it, is that the reason we're talking about these, well, I hope we are, is because these are objects people want to live with. People that want to own antiques, that want to own art objects and have them in their lives as an influence. If you do this just to make money, if you're buying and selling Chinese antiques, for example, just to make money, and you're not really crazy about the stuff, it's an occupation. This may not be the video for you, but if you're interested in living with art, living with antiques, I want to sort of share some of my views and observations from over the years, because I've been at it for a long time. And I've been in the business for nearly 40 years and have been heavily involved in running auctions and ran a gallery and had exposure to some of the most amazing antiques in America because I'm in New England, and we handled a lot of the great pieces that ended up that have ended up in museums, institutions, prominent collections, and so forth. And I've gotten to meet a lot of great collectors. And the question often comes up is, people will say, well, why do you want to have authentic art and antiques in your house as decoration? And I think this really comes from two basic things. One is that collectors are inherently curious. They're curious about history. They're curious about how things are made. They're curious about design and the history of design and how we got to where we are today with certain objects that we live with and where they originated. And also, is there a story behind a particular object? Does it tell a tale? Does this object, while it's like many others, did it belong to someone of interest? Did it come from some place of interest? That kind of thing. And then you sort of have to weigh out, how does that make you feel? What do you think about? Do you want to live with it in your daily life? And if you look at objects and art in this way, you'd probably be very happy pursuing these interests if you gave it a chance to truly enrich your life and how you live. Curiosity about history of an object and understanding its design and fully understanding why it was made is at the core of all true collectors and people interested in art and material culture. And material culture includes everything that are made by human beings or gathered by human beings and used by human beings. All right. Collections are generally created over very long periods of time, and they never follow a straight line. Interests ebb and flow, but nearly always leave a really interesting trail of stories and where the pieces came from and how you acquired them and what you've learned about them since you've owned them and so forth. And these collections tend to be very highly personalized. And it's only natural to want them in your environment so you can enjoy and see them every day. And like I said, if you don't have any interest in art and history and material culture, you could go watch something else. But I think most of you do. And my approach has been for many, many years, when I go into a place that I've never been in before, a new room, a new house, a new building, it could be a historic site or something, whatever, and it's presumably furnished, I always look at the objects individually. I try to extract them from the room, from the setting they're in, clear away all the clutter, and just look at the object. And that's how I look at a room. Overall first impressions to me are very superficial. I don't put much weight in it when I look at a room, even no matter how colorfully it's decorated or how interestingly it looks at a blink. I want to see the objects. And the objects, once I understand them and look at them and decide if they're authentic or just copies, then I decide what I think of the room. And all the paint and chintz in the world isn't going to change that, and because a lot of that is just camouflage. And I consider whether it has merit or not, and can you recognize something you've never seen before as being really good or interesting, even though you have no idea what it is. All right, that's developing your own sense of taste. You look at something, it looks interesting, it's got a great line to it, it's great color, it's great form, it looks a little like this, it looks like that. Maybe you don't know what it is, so you ask the people you're staying with, what is that? Where did that painting come from? Who did that sculpture? Who made that piece of furniture? Who wove that textile? And then you get into some interesting stories. You learn a lot. And it's the same approach you generally take, I think, when most people visit museums. Museums are generally set up so that you can enjoy each piece on its own. Paintings are hung separate from other paintings, obviously. Furniture is often put, with a drape or something behind it in an area so that it can be observed for its own merits. Occasionally they're in room settings if they're trying to show what a classic dining room from a particular period or a living room from a particular period might be look like. But often the objects are right there just for you to study. And the same goes for porcelain, silver, bronzes, and other things. All right. So then, when that's all done, then you consider the overall composition of the room. That's how I look at it. And does it leave a positive impression? Is it well done? Is it nicely laid out? Is it attractive and comfortable? And that sort of thing. And you can learn a lot about people by looking at how they live and what they live with, what they surround themselves with. The interior of a house is really the reflection of who lives there. And true taste and true style have nothing to do with money. I know people often think, style and taste and decorating takes money. No, it has everything to do with curiosity and a desire to live in an environment that has a distinct feel and atmosphere of hopefully genuineness. All right. And you don't need to have a lot of money to decorate a house beautifully. As a matter of fact, you can go to auctions and buy pieces in that way from dealers for much less money than you're going to pay in a department store. For in many cases a fraction. So the money argument, if you have a middle class income, you're in a working family, you're doing okay, you can afford to buy art and antiques. I think what stops people is sometimes they get intimidated by the subject, or they don't know where to look or where to ask. And that's too bad. Asking questions and learning is a big part of the fun. It really is, and it can become a passion, obsession, and something you can do your entire life. All right. And unfortunately today, too many houses are just furnished with what I call dead objects. These are things that lack any genuineness, objects that have no individual, authentic, historical, or cultural merit, and they basically represent nothing. Most objects are just sort of quasi-representative ghosts of an original that was made long ago. And they don't do anything other than perhaps providing the owner with some functionality, a table that holds up the magazines, and that sort of thing, a bureau to throw your socks in. And hopefully the owner will think, well, maybe this will look good when we have guests. It'll meet their approval. But sadly, in the end, those kinds of rooms, everything in them usually ends up in a landfill within 10 or 20 years. They're worth nothing. They become tired, they become trite and boring. And when it comes to dead furnishings and objects, most are just nondescript, unoffensive, factory-made things in the style of something, but not authentic. Like end tables, table lamps, sofas, chairs, generic borderline FTD type flower vases, assorted knockoffs from one type or another. Pretty much everything sold by IKEA is just dead stuff. It's functional. It has a purpose. Go in your kitchen to organize your shelves, maybe organize your closets for your clothes and so forth. But IKEA is not known for making attractive furniture. They make a stark style of furniture, and that's it. And the same goes true for most department stores. Most of what they sell are evolved appearance copies made in some sweatshop or factory in Indonesia or China or somewhere else that's emulating something else. It's often poorly made, poor workmanship, poor materials. It'll hold together for a few years and that's it. But in the end, you end up with a house far short of what it could be if the resident, the owner, took a genuine interest in what he's living with, what he's doing. In a word, most of it is just junk. It's just useful junk. And this is what we have today in many houses, just full of dead things. And they do nothing but take up space. They give you a place to sit, a place to eat, socialize, and provide a veneer of sort of a meaningless elegance or sophistication, but are just that. It's just a veneer. And this is the kind of thing that I think it doesn't have to be that way. And it's also very wasteful. I mean, you go to a department store, you buy something, you're going to be throwing it in the landfill rather than buy something that's been fabulously made by hand by somebody who maybe was one of the original designers or had something to do with a period of art and architecture or furniture, and they made it. And it's still here, and you can buy it for about the same price as buying something that's just been slapped together in some foreign country. All right, and then of course you have the problem of the design and decorator industry, and this is a real gripe of mine. I used to work with a lot of good decorators, and there were a number of them I knew that were absolutely fabulous. A couple of guys out in California, I remember in particular, we had one who worked in the Newport, Rhode Island area. She was very good. And all of them dealt only in antiques over the years. And we would help them with doing decorating jobs and so forth of celebrities and whatnot. And they put in great things. And then all of that changed when decorators started focusing more on the look rather than the art, the antique. So you have designers that are making reproductions today, designer reproductions that are sort of pastiche creations from previous periods, and that's what the decorators push today. Because if you're a designer or a decorator, and you have to fill one house full of art and antiques, it's a lot of legwork. But if you can clip it all out of a catalog and do it all on the internet, you can do a lot of houses at once and give a presentable product that is just basically often nonsense, rubbish. And a lot of these magazines and the design industry and the decorator industry, you'll notice, focus very, very heavily on Hollywood celebrities, industrialist sports figures, what they're doing in their latest, $20 million house. And people take that on. If they see it in Architectural Digest or Veranda magazine, they take it on and say, well, that's what's in. That's what my house should look like. And then they begin to emulate it on their own, even if they don't hire a decorator. And it sort of pollutes the entire the entire market. And this the old what places should look like becomes a formula. And it mutates over time, giving the decorating industry sort of an endless new ways to get folks to redo their homes. And in the end, it's all about money. The Ben decorated house can be spaces filled with fine art, antiques, and that the owner didn't really like or pick. The decorator picked them for them, and they acquired them because the decorator, the designer, or somebody told them they should, but they don't really have an interest in it. And that's the sad part. They end up living with objects they're not crazy about, that they don't know anything about, that they didn't get from a pursuit of interest. It was just presented to them and say, well, this looks good on that wall. And it could be junk, it could be something really good, but it's not anything that means anything to the owner. And the things that you surround yourself with should mean something to you. Usually they're most often just sort of selected by the decorators or designers for their generally pleasing appearance, interesting shapes, colors, and so on. It goes with the color theme of the room, which is often adopted first. And in other words, it's not a space that reflects the owner's actual taste, but has instead been created by others and sold to the owner as how they should live. All right, and that's really sort of the thing. If you're working with a decorator and they're feeding you their vision, get rid of them unless you really are hopeless. Or if you're looking to design a room, be honest with yourself and say, does this really look like something I'd own? Or is it just something that's dramatic, colorful, and has visual impact? Because if it's just that, it's not going to hold up over time. It's as simple as that. And for example, for several decades now, we've been living with this sort of ultra-modern minimalism look. This was all the rage. You remember when they'd have these very minimally decorated rooms with gray or beige walls, neutral toned, expansive light gray or off-white walls, high ceilings, bland, patternless, nearly nearly neutrally toned carpets, massive windows with recessed lighting, and techno-modern furniture, maybe by Desed or somebody, some Swiss company. They're silly Caterpillar, but they call them the Caterpillar couches. They do the ridiculous things that everybody gets rid of after a few years. Live Auctioneers is full of them because nobody wants them. And maybe the only thing in the room that offers any color or visual interest is the flat screen. And if that's your living room and the only thing in the room worth looking at is the flat screen, it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. You should be able to go into your home, into your living room, sit in a nice, comfortable, beautifully made chair, put your feet up, read a book, and enjoy your environment. And a lot of these rooms, you can't sit in them and enjoy them because there's nothing in them. They're dead rooms. They're sort of colorless hellscapes. All right. And then you could have the other side of the coin where the room has been absolutely decorated to death with silly amounts of patterned fabric, wall colors meant to be dramatic but are sort of borderline garish, the occasional old piece of furniture, but are mostly reproductions, mostly reproduction chairs, reproduction tables with faux factory surfaces, and maybe the decorator had his man go over it and work the surface down a little bit, and then it's all sort of polished off with some dramatic color or something as a dominant effect. And these rooms don't hold up over time, and people often end up redoing them. I've known people that have redecorated the interiors of their houses in the last 20 years 3 or 4 times because they're never satisfied, because they're buying and working with people who are telling them what they should have. And that's a very common thing. And if you look at some of these Hollywood houses, or you look at houses of sports figures, and you see how they're decorated, you read the room and you say, does that look like something this guy or a woman would own, knowing what you know about them, especially if they're well known? No, they just took it because they got their hands on a famous decorator who told them that's what they should have. And unfortunately, that becomes the style that sort of trickles into everything else. All right. No matter what, when they're done, these spaces are, if it's done by somebody else, they're really never really tasteful or elegant or interesting in any sense. It's just a kind of flashy coloration, I guess you says, that really says nothing. If you've paid somebody a lot of money for this, all you're going to end up with is basically, I'm willing to spend a lot of money and I want folks to know I have arrived, no matter how silly and vapid and strident the space can look, because in the end, you're going to end up redoing it again in 10 years anyway. And these places most often just become expensive sort of trivial monuments to the owner's personal shallowness and lack of imagination, curiosity, or appreciation of human history. That is the vicious cycle. And you rarely see it with people who are truly interested in art, who truly collect, that really, really care about it. And the differences are amazing. And there are lots of great examples out there of beautifully done homes, beautifully furnished houses that are full of interesting historic objects that didn't necessarily cost an arm and a leg, but were selected with a tasteful eye, a knowledgeable person. And there are people out there that are in the decorator and design business that know a lot about antiques. And they don't rely on expressions like, oh, it's so fun, or isn't it wonderful, or it's just gorgeous. Those are words that people use when they don't know anything. Those are words that decorators and designers fall back on when they don't know what to tell you about an object. All right. If they know what it is, and they know how old it is, and they know when it was made, and they can tell you why it was wonderful, that's a different thing. But all too often, it's just nothing. It's just pap, and it's too bad. So again, if you like living with art and you're interested in history, you're interested in objects, you can do a wonderful job furnishing your own home. All right. And unfortunately, too many people never really develop a solid personal taste when it comes to their houses. It's too bad. They read trendy magazines. They read things. They say, that color's nice, put that in. And it's sort of an epidemic, sort of meaningless, dead furnishings. And in most cases, is not due to a lack of money, but due to a lack of curiosity, a little bit of laziness, and sort of personal insecurities, worrying about what others will think, how you furnish your house. And that's why so many people hire decorators, because it is safe. The decorator will not embarrass you, will not leave you with something unattractive, and you can be okay when you have guests. And that's a very sad way to live. The fact is that, like I said, most houses can be furnished rather with a very modest budget if you have a good eye. If you know what you're doing, you can create a spectacular place to live, full of great, interesting objects, great carpets, good art, good things, without going into the hole for an enormous amount of money. You have to do a little bit of work for it, but you'll end up with a much more rewarding place in the end. All right, and for me, a life living in a house, without art and antiques is a pretty empty one. We have two houses, and both of them have antiques in them. Both of them have, they have Persian rugs and antique Italian tables and Chippendale chests and Chinese tables, Chinese vases, paintings from every continent. Pretty much from Africa to the Bahamas to China to Japan. I like that, and it can all be mixed together beautifully. It all works together beautifully. Quality objects from any culture can be mixed with a quality object from another culture. There is no limit to the combinations of things that you can do if you own interesting, well done things that are correctly made, that come from a certain period. You can mix up any period with any period, I believe, with a little bit of thought. And that is something that you don't see very often anymore. You don't see eclectic rooms as much as you like to, and so forth. And this is sort of where we are today. And understanding and appreciating objects is a process of, a sort of personal evolution. It requires effort and an endless amount of curiosity. And true collectors have a natural resistance to trends. If you are a true collector, you know what I'm saying. You only buy what you like, you appreciate, and you desire to buy more of them. And usually trends, things that you see in design magazines when you're decorating, looking into painting a room, it's all stuff that was designed for followers or people that can be led by others to decide what's acceptable and what isn't. And to true taste in deciding how you really want to decorate your home or your condo or your office where you work begins with an inherent curiosity in art, culture, and mankind's journey to where we are today. This curiosity is the foundation of every collection. And beginnings, and from the beginning is the starting point, and then you refine your taste as you move along. You refine your eye. You become more and more focused, and you eventually arrive at the point where you can really pick things that look great to have in your home, that you can enhance your collection with, that you can study, and give you a very full environment in which to live. And if you have that interest, I would recommend that's what you do. And I think in the future we're going to do other videos like this. We can talk about things because I've done over a number of houses. I've seen good decorating jobs, good interiors, what should go in interior, what you should do with them as far as art and antiques go. This is not about picking chintz and trivial nonsense like that. It's about picking, looking at objects for what they are, and is it of interest, and is it something you want to own? All right, and we're going to talk about Chinese art and Chinese objects. For example, if you have Chinese vases in your house, put flowers in them. That's what they're meant for. They're flower vases. Don't just put them on a shelf by themselves. If you have planters, and they're supposed to have a plant in them, or a fish tank, put some fish in it. Use your objects. Use the bureaus. Use the chest of drawers. Use the table in the hallway to hold up a beautiful flower, a vase, or something like that. And putting it all together, and don't be afraid of what you might discover. And I think that's sort of the way to do it. And I hope you enjoyed this. I just was giving my thoughts on the subject, and maybe we'll do some more of these. Okay? All right. Have a wonderful week. I've had my little rant. I hope you didn't mind. It's a bit off track for me, but it's something I think about often, and I think many of you do too, because ultimately what you buy and what you collect, if you're a collector, is going to live with you. And living with a collection that's of great interest to you, it will often be of great interest to people who come and visit you as well. Collections are interesting, especially if the collector is enthusiastic about the collection. It's a very infectious thing. All right. Have a great week. I'll be back Friday with the regular video, and let me know what you think of this. And maybe we'll talk some more about it as we go along. We'll keep doing the Chinese stuff, of course, but I think that once you acquire things, it's good to think about where you're going to put them. What are you going to do with them? And that includes everything from porcelain to bronzes to carpets to paintings, and they're great to mix and match. Okay, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you haven't yet. All right, bye-bye.